Hello, hello, hello. Good evening. Happy Friday Eve to everyone. It's your girl Marcie from Brown Girl Collective coming to you with something new, fresh and new. So I'm looking forward to talking to you all tonight and just sharing some good information and awesome guests and just doing some new things and that's going to help and encourage us all. I do see we have a few people in. So if you have a chance, just drop in the comments where you're joining us from so I kind of know who's here and where you're from. And I'll give it a couple more minutes for some folks to join us. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the first ever edition of Live Well Sister. Real excited to have you here. All right. See, we got a few people in the room, so I'm not going to belabor because I know everybody is busy and I don't want to keep you here any longer than you need to be. So, once again, my name is Marcie Thomas. I am the founder of Brown Girl Collective and also, obviously, your host of this new show called Live Well Sister. And just to give you a little idea of what Live Well Sister is about, it is a forum for us to come together and just get more information from other sisters like us that allow us to live our best lives in a variety of ways, in a variety of areas, whether it be our spiritual lives or our personal self care, relationships with others, how we relate to our careers, how we manage our finances, how we give back to our communities, as well as how we just live a good life and have fun. So that's what this series is going to be about. Tonight is our first show, but there will be shows coming up every other week, every other Thursday, same time, same place, with wonderful guests that will help us to get our lives together and make sure that we are living our best, most blessed, most balanced lives. So, without any further delay, I'm going to go ahead and start introducing you to our first guest for this evening, Trey Anthony. Trey Anthony is a professional speaker, lifestyle coach, producer, author, and award winning playwright. But she's also your girl who tells it like it is. Through art, humor, and the power of a clear message, she's here to give Black women the no nonsense tools to take control of their lives and thrive. Trey's sold out hit play, The Kink in My Hair, grossed millions and broke box office records across Canada, the United States, and England after it premiered in 2001. It was named one of the top 10 plays in Canadian theatrical history and received 4 NAACP Theater Awards, including Best Playwright. It continues to be produced on stages throughout North America. In 2007, Trey adapted The Kink in My Hair for the small screen, making her the first African Canadian woman to create, write, and produce a primetime television show on a major Canadian network. In addition to that, Trey's daring and thought provoking play, How Black Mothers Say I Love You, premiered in 2017. It was the first play to be featured on the Globe and Mail's bestsellers list. It has also been optioned as a feature film and shortlisted for the Sundance Institute Screenwriters Lab, and is also in development to be adapted into a television series. That's not enough. Trey is also a well-known speaker, the author of the book we'll be talking about tonight, and she is an adoption advocate and mother of her beloved son, Kai. So without any further delay, we're going to go ahead and bring her to the stage. Welcome, Trey.
Hey, thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. And I didn't mention the name of the book in the bio because here it is. The book we're going to be talking about tonight is Black Girl in Love with Herself,
Yes.
a guide to self-love, healing, and creating the life you truly deserve, which is something that is very important for all of us. So welcome again, Trey. We had a few moments to talk before the show began, but I'm so blessed to have you here, blessed to have you on as our first guest, as our esteemed first guest. So thank you so much for joining us for Live Well, Sister.
Thank you.
There's so much that we could talk about, but for those who may not know you, just just give us a little bit about your background, where you come from, your family history, and things like that, so we can start getting to know a little bit about you and what makes you the awesome woman that you are.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of it's in the book, Black Girl in Love with Herself, and it really is reflected of how I write and what I write. I was born in England to Jamaican parents. My mom was 17, my dad was 18. I was raised by my grandmother, who was also Jamaican. And then I moved to moved to Toronto, Canada when I was 12. So I claim Canada mainly for my home. I usually say I'm Canadian, but people always say they detect some sort of accent. So they're like,
Yeah.
you sound a little bit British, you sound a little bit Canadian, you sound a little bit Jamaican. So I just say it's all of that, right? Whatever you hear, that's what it is. And then about 7 years ago, I moved to Atlanta. And I went there because I got a playwright residency at Horizon Theater. And I also wrote for the OWN Network on Ambitions. So I stayed in Atlanta working on the Will Packer show there. And then I just recently moved to Tampa, Florida, Thanksgiving. So now I'm in Tampa. So I'm a little bit of a rolling stone, right? And I started my work. When I first started out, I really wanted to be an actor. That was my main focus. And the reality soon hit me. I thought, if you're really talented and ambitious and creative, you'll get all of these wonderful roles and people will hire you. And the industry just didn't know what to do with a woman who looked like me, and I got really, just really disheartened by the roles or the lack of roles and opportunities that were available for someone like me. So I would get crackhead number 1, baby mama number 2, girl on welfare number 3. And it was at that point where I was just like, the world doesn't want to see me. And I was just like, I need to write, because obviously they're not writing authentic roles for Black women. Mm-hmm. So I started out writing The Kink in My Hair, which was my first ever play. I always say to people, I had never written a damn thing in my life. And I had no idea that it would become this overnight success and, just break box office records. But I think similar to the response, what I'm getting from the book, Black Girl in Love with Herself, I think with The Kink in My Hair, it was the same thing of Black women really wanting to see their lives authentically displayed on stage, layered in a way that they could recognize. The play dealt with some really vulnerable issues. Like there was a monologue on suicide, one on incest, one on colorism, one on police brutality, and so it really made Black women dig deep. And a lot of the responses that we got were that, 1 minute you were laughing and then 1 minute you were crying, and then women were just like, I felt seen. And so I've always written from that type of place. And then my second piece was How Black Mothers Say I Love You, what looked at the relationships between mothers and daughters of immigrant mothers who leave their children behind in the Caribbean. And I really wanted to write about that because that was the experience of my own grandmother and mother's story, and my story as well, right? So, and then Black Girl in Love with Herself came about because, again, I felt the self-help market wasn't really addressing our unique needs as Black women and how we move through the world. It was all very well to say, oh, lean in or be vulnerable. Right. And there's an extra layer as we move through the world as Black women, right? Of dealing with being seen as the strong Black woman, us, having some resistance in our community to therapy, us dealing with our relationships with our own mothers, our fathers, our children. And so I really felt a need to, again, say, it's not a one size fit all, right?
Right. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And that's how Black Girl in Love came about. But it also was my own journey. I was going through a really horrific, cruel breakup that came really sudden.
Yeah.
And I was a new mom to a 2-week-old baby that I just
wow.
adopted. And I found myself on the bathroom floor just crying, not recognizing my own life, going, what the heck happened to my life? Like, what is this? And that's where the roots of Black Girl in Love with Herself came about, because I realized I had invested so much into someone else and into my relationship that I forgot about myself. And I knew a lot of women had experienced that, or were living that, or going through that, where we put our own needs, our own desires, our own dreams on the back burner in order to make other people happy, or to fulfill this imaginary checklist that we have in our head of what we're supposed to have in our lives. Yeah.
And I really love, thank you for giving just people kind of an overview of what, your story is and how you came to writing this wonderful book. As I was telling Trey before we came in, there are so many things that she talks about in the book that resonated with me. And that's why I chose her to be the first guest, because some of the things that I hope to talk about as we move forward with Live Well Sister, there are things that she talks about. And one thing, I'm like, you must have read my questions, because one of the things you mentioned was the whole thing about the strong Black woman, and how there is this myth of us being strong, and that whatever happens to us, we're just supposed to, shake it up a little bit and just keep it moving. But one thing I do like about this book and what you talk about in telling your story is that you show us that no, we're not always going to be strong, and that in some ways having that mindset can be damaging, because it doesn't allow us to be our authentic selves and oftentimes get the help and assistance that we need. I know that it's being strong is something big for all Black women in general, but in your story, I also see, and just to let you know, the book is part memoir, part story, part self-help. So we learn lessons through hearing Trey's story. But do you feel that as a woman of immigrant background, that it's sometimes even more so, just based upon the way I hear a lot of stories about the people who had to struggle to come to the United States or Canada or wherever, or England, whatever the place may be, and that there's really a push, maybe even more so than it might be with other Black women?
Definitely, I could definitely say from my own experience, and I don't want to talk for every single immigrant family, but I could definitely say from my own experience, my grandmother came from Jamaica to England. She was on a boat for 28 days. Wow. When she went to England and was looking for housing, she would knock on the doors and it would say, no dogs, no cats, no Blacks, right? My grandmother then got a job working for the British government, cleaning the trains at night, sweeping the trains at night, right? And my grandmother had less than a grade 4 education, and she was able to use that money to buy her own home and to also start a side business and look after her kids and send for her children from Jamaica, right? My mother had me at age 17 and was able to also then look after 3 children as a single mom, and then put all of us through school. My sister is a PhD in math. I'm, whatever success story there is.
You are quite a success.
My brother is also a very successful writer, social worker. Like all of us have done extremely well. And I think, and I know for myself, anytime that I felt tired, or I felt I couldn't cope, or I felt overwhelmed, the dialogue that kept going over and over in my head was, oh, but your mother and grandmother had it so much worse. So why are you complaining? You have resources and a life that they could only imagine, and they worked so hard for you. So why do you feel that you cannot succeed? And I think what we do is that a lot of us as Black women, I think too, right, that we do this comparison of pain and whose life was harder. And a lot of us come from mothers and grandmothers who, yes, indeed, had it way much harder than us, but that does not take away from our own hardship. And I think until we're allowed to own that and also say there's another different layer of stress, and there's another way of how we are moving through the world right now that is stressful. and that is really harming us and dealing with a lot of health issues that we are not, like even just social media alone is a different layer of stress that our mothers and grandmothers didn't have to deal with, right? Because when you go on social media and you see everybody's life that looks so picture perfect, and you're like, oh, I don't got that car. I don't have those perfect children. I don't have matching pajamas with my partner. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
So all of those things, and also too, as Black women, a lot of us now are the first. And I talk about that in my book. I was the first Black woman in Canada to have my own TV show. So yes, that was a success story, but that also came with another layer of pressure, right? That people had a whole different expectation of me. And I had no one to go to say, I'm actually feeling really stressed by this. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I'm feeling very isolated. I'm dealing with all of the microaggressions being the first Black woman in the TV industry in Canada to have this level of success. And everybody kept going like, you must be like so happy. You're making all of this money. You know, you're on TV. You know, everybody's running around asking you for your autograph. And so it then there was not a safe space for me to name all of those other things that were happening. And I think that happens to a lot of us as successful Black women, that people only see the success story, but they don't know our inner struggle and what it took for us to get there and even to remain there. That's the other thing, right? So to get there and then to remain there is a whole nother level, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you just touched on so many things, like you said, the microaggressions, you know, the people questioning how you got to where you got to, you know, who did you sleep with? You know, were you an affirmative action hire? You know, all these sorts of things, you know, people taking your ideas and, you know, trying to pass them off as your own. I know there's one instance in the book where you talk about working on your show and having a Karen who would, you know, you try to have a regular conversation with her and she takes it as you being aggressive towards her and, you know, all these sorts of things. So yes, it is definitely, you know, our struggles or our pains or our stressors are not the same as what, you know, our mothers or grandmothers or, you know, previous generations went through, but that doesn't mean that they're not valid at all. You know, and sometimes it is hard for others to understand because they think, oh, well, you know, you got it easy. It's good for you. You know, you're making all this money, you know, all these things that we didn't get to do, but there's a price to be paid for all of those things.
Definitely. And that's the thing that we don't want to talk about is the price. And when we don't talk about it with others and we don't even name it for ourselves, it will show up in our bodies. It will show up in how we deal with our mental health or not deal with our mental health. It will show up as depression. It will show up as anxiety. It will show up as overeating. It will show up as suicide, you know, all of those things, hypertension. So there's a lot of things that as Black women, we're not naming and we're not calling it out. And it's then showing up in our bodies. So that was the other thing that was really essential for me to address those things in my book, and say, we need to start naming it and calling it, and also providing safe spaces for other Black women to say, I know, sis, that this must be hard for you or challenging, or if you want to cry about this, here's a space. Instead of saying to every single Black woman, yes, girl, you got this, you're strong. And I was guilty of doing that myself to a lot of the Black women. I talk about that in the book, that I had to really re-examine how I showed up for other Black women, not only for myself, but also how I showed up for other Black women and not giving them the safe space to be able to say, you can be vulnerable here with me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Paula is saying that yes, we are dealing with a lot of mental and emotional stressors. You know, absolutely, absolutely. It's not just, you know, some of the things are the same, but then there are things that are definitely different. Now, one of the things that you talk about, just as a Black woman, just being able to be vulnerable. And sometimes it's hard for us to be vulnerable because there can be fear attached to that, or you know, you get those, oh, why are you, you know, some of the negative feedback that may come when you are or do attempt to be vulnerable. So talk a little bit about that in your experience with that.
Yes. In the book, Black Girl in Love with Herself, I talk about, I gave an example of when my whole life blew up in my face and my partner ended our 4-year relationship, and I didn't see it coming. I really did not see it coming. But there were definitely signs that I chose to ignore.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a 2-week-old baby. I had 10 days to move out of a condo that we had shared. I was now mothering in a pandemic. I was quote unquote now homeless, right? And I just want to make sure that because I used to work with homeless women, so I don't want to take away from that. I had the financial means to find a home. I just did not have the emotional strength to go out and look for something, right? I was just so devastated. And my mom and sister came down to help me, right? And, and to help me pack up my apartment and check on me. And I was a huge mess. And one night, I just really broke down crying, and I had never broken down in front of my mother, right? And I remember looking at her and I said, Mom, I don't think I can do this. I can't do this. Like, this is too much. And I really felt it. Like, I really felt broken. I really felt hurt. I felt scared. I felt abandoned. I felt embarrassed. I felt humiliated. I felt everything that I believed in was no longer there. And my whole sense of identity had just been erased. And I remember just saying, I can't do this. And I started crying. And my mother said to me, and I knew she meant it in the most, way, this was her way of comforting me. And she said, remember whose daughter you are. And your mother and grandmother, we had it way worse. So you can't make this kill you, right? This can't break you. And I remember thinking to myself, and it was just this moment in my head, and I said, I don't want to be strong right now. I want actually a safe space to be able to say, I'm scared. I need support in that. I need someone to say, you know what, here's a space that if you want to cry and if you want to break down, if you want to fall apart, not once, not twice, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times, I don't care. But here it is. And I said to myself, I needed someone to say it was okay to be vulnerable. And my mother would not allow that. And she didn't know what to do with that. And I recognized then and there, and I wrote in my journal that night, I said, I need to find safe spaces for me because this is not something that strength is going to get me through. I need to tap into this pain. I need to address it. I need to deal with it. And I need to find some kind of support to say, I'm broken. I'm really broken. Right? And I need to get all of those little pieces and patch them up together. I'm not solid. I'm not whole at this very moment. And I think a lot of times as Black women, we are not given that permission to fall apart. Like white women can, fall apart at and I talk about it in the book, right? At a group meeting, right? Right, a staff meeting, and everybody's passing them the Kleenex. And we as Black women are the ones who usually will go into a cubicle in the bathroom and cry by ourselves, or be crying on the way to work in our car, and then we show up as the superwoman as we get into the office. And I was like, I don't want to play into that anymore. And that was why I really felt a need to write this book, because I knew I wasn't the only woman who wanted permission to fall apart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we all need those opportunities. And what you're saying, I know I had an instance at my day job a few weeks ago where somebody asked me to do one thing. I did the one thing, sent it to them. 5 minutes later, they came, well, can you do this too? And I'm like, can you just ask me to do all of that at one time? And I sat and I had a moment where it was just like, and because it's like people don't understand. But then, if I fall apart or go off or whatever, then of course that becomes problematic. So yes, you are definitely not the only one. And it is important, to make sure that we have those spaces.
Exactly.
For people to talk to, for people to connect with, but also you speak about in the book getting therapy as well, getting therapy and mental health. So that is important. I know it's something that more and more of us are starting to speak on now. There used to be a time where I guess it's still a stigma for some. I believe it's becoming less of a stigma, but it is important for us to, seek that help. And that's something that you did as well.
Hmm. And that was important for me to talk about in the book about therapy, because I came from a family who, when I said I was going to start therapy, was like, why are you going to tell all your business to white people? Right. And I also talk about in the book where I didn't realize that I was going through a depression, and I had an undiagnosed depression. And I remember saying to my mom, I think I might be depressed. And she goes, of course you're depressed. Everybody knows that, but you'll get over it. Right. And I was kind of like, and that was something, only after writing the book. And I had so many women who inboxed me, or in book clubs when I came to talk about the book, would say, you were the first time that I was able to talk about my own depression, my own anxiety, suicidal thoughts, those things. And I think as Black women, we need to talk about that. And I also talk about in the book about how many various family members in my family who I know had undiagnosed depression or anxiety or dealing with their mental health, and we never talked about it. We never talked about it as a family, and we just kept going as like business as per usual. And those kind of silences are what is killing us as Black women, right? And it also is how sometimes, because we are not getting the care and the treatment and support, that also comes out in how we then parent our own children, because a lot of our anger, a lot of our anguish, a lot of our emotions, we then take them out on our own children, right? And so we have to really start to look at the messaging that not only we give ourselves, but we give to other Black women as well. And for me, I wanted to say it stops right here. And I'm going to take ownership right now and say, I'm not going to play into this anymore because it's no longer serving me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that is one of the things that you did to help with your own healing, but there were other things that you talk about and recommend as well that were positive, like exercise and just some other things. So, because I will speak for myself, I have been in therapy, currently am in therapy, and but I'm also like getting outside and enjoying the
Yes.
sunshine, taking walks, just doing a lot of different things, because there is a such thing as having a balance. That's the mental piece is one piece. There's also our physical health. There's also, things that we can do spiritually, and just our relationships, and getting out and having fun with friends and laughing, and just enjoying life. So, what other things do you find help you besides, the therapy, which is important, but there are other things. What things work well for
Yeah.
you?
For me, the big one is exercise. It really
Mhm.
helps with my mood. And I've become an avid jogger. I never thought I would be that person who is like at 7 o'clock in the morning jogging. I used to roll my eyes at those kind of people. And now I'm that person. But I really realized it really helped with my mental health a
Mhm.
lot. Massage, I'm glad that you mentioned that. That was something that really that I decided to really implement into my own daily living. That's essential for me. The other thing is sleep. Sleep is a huge thing, right?
Mhm.
Of really being intentional about getting good sleep and resting.
Mhm.
Sometimes, getting away from social media, turning off your phone, setting boundaries with your family and your friends. That's a
Right.
huge one, right? Not every single party you need to attend, right? And
Mhm.
every drama you don't need to be invited to, right? So that is
Absolutely.
also a big one. And also to just checking in physically with people. I think especially during the pandemic, a lot of us are feeling a level of isolation. And
Mhm.
social media gives us this false sense of connection
That's
that we're
true.
actually involved in people's lives, and we're not. And so for me, one of the biggest things I did was every single day, I would make a commitment to call one of my friends on FaceTime
Mhm.
because I needed that connection of seeing them and talking to them, and also being able to vent, to be able to say, this is what I'm working through. This is what I'm finding challenging, taking long baths. That was another thing. And just sometimes going out for a beautiful walk in nature, all of those things, cooking, that is something too. Like I was one of those people who, because I was working all of these long hours, I'd grab something on the go. And
Mhm.
just the idea of cooking and nurturing yourself is so important. So that really shifted a lot of things for me. And I really dealt with my whole care of myself in a very holistic approach. Like I was like, it has to be a mental, emotionally, physical, spiritual, praying, meditating, all of those things was part of my self-love journey.
Absolutely. And all of those things are definitely important. One of the things I like you say in the book, and I'm like, oh, I'm a little jealous. You say you go get your massages for 2 hours. I'm like, ooh,
girl, listen.
I've never had a 2-hour massage.
Girl, listen, you got to do it. It will change your whole damn life. It will change your whole damn life. I used to be like, oh, 2 hours is too much. That's too indulgent. And now, girl, listen. That's my thing. It's 2 hours.
Right.
2 hours.
Yes, I've definitely put that on my to-do list because the hour is great, but I'm thinking 2 hours. Yeah, that would be really awesome. Because one of the other things, especially right now, and I know, of course, we have to be careful and be safe and all of that, but just the thing of physical touch, because we are separated from a lot of our loved ones and the people that we care about. And, you know, you see somebody, if you haven't seen them in a while, you might want to hug them. You're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't. Yeah. So, you know, and that physical touch that isn't necessarily about sexuality is important.
It's so important. And it's also too, I think for me who I had been in such a long-term relationship, so I was used to having that physical contact and that physical intimacy. And so as I write about in the book, I think especially as single women, it's really important for us to find touch that does not also involve it being sexual. So for me, one of the biggest things that I do every Sunday, I like to have a bath full of like Epsom salt and lavender oil. And then I come out and then I just kind of like rub my whole skin down with like coconut butter and lavender. And that's something that I have decided I need that touch. If I'm not getting it from someone else, then I should be able to get it from myself and have a level of intimacy with myself. And I think that is something that we're not taught as women, that we should be able to touch ourselves, and there shouldn't be any shame in that. There should be a level of, this is how I take care of me. And one of the biggest things that I keep saying right now is we gotta let people enter our lives and catch us loving ourselves. And then they contribute to that love. They don't give us the only love, they contribute to it.
Absolutely.
That's what I believe in. Yeah.
And that's really what the book is about. Being able to fall in love with yourself. And part of that falling in love with yourself is making sure that, you know, we're taking care of certain areas, whether it be, you know, getting the mental health help that we need, whether it be exercising or, you know, the physical touch, or making sure that, you know, if you're the person, you talk about this as well, if you're the person in the money and the family who's made the money and become successful, that you're not letting people use you and abuse you financially. So, you know, that's important. Sam, talk a little bit about that, because we know that that's something that happens a lot, especially for the person who makes it in the family.
The person who, you know, and we all have that, right? The rich auntie, the bougie one in the family, the one who quote unquote got out. And I was very aware that I was that person in my family, right? And it's about setting, and I talk about it too. I think when you are the first one in your family who's quote unquote successful, there's also this level of success guilt that accompanies that, right? And for me, it was the way I used to give money away to my family or give money to friends or pay for things at all times, was because I wanted to make people know that the money hadn't changed me, that I still was down, you know, I was still likable. I didn't want people to be like, you know, there's a Jamaican saying what says, she get rich and switch, right? And I didn't want that, right? For people to have, you know, my name in their mouth saying, oh, she just changed. So that was the way of me kind of, you know, dealing with that guilt as well. And also thinking, you know, I didn't want them to think I was better than them. And so I had no boundaries around money. Like I had nothing around saying, oh, it's okay to say no to this person, because it was also a way of that. I thought this is how I show and give love, and this is how people love me. And I write about that in the book, about just even like when family or friends ask you for money, everybody has an emergency and everybody knows how to spend your money in that emergency.
You're counting your coins.
Everybody knows how how they're going to spend your money in that emergency. Right? And I said, I recognized that I had to then I would say, I need 24 or 48 hours to think about this. Right. And I also say in the book, you also have to think about when you start to give money away, that it's no longer lending, because only give money that you can afford to give away, and it's not going to hurt you. Right. And then also to think about how other ways you can support that person. Right. Maybe it's about maybe can I help you get your resume done? Maybe I can watch your kids. Maybe I can send over a food box with some food, nutritious food for you. Maybe I can order, a meal kit box for you for the next 3 months, so you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff.
Right.
Instead of just always giving money in this endless money pit, And that was something that I really had to learn. And even with the women that I work with as clients, around setting clear boundaries and knowing where your money is going, right? And for me, who grew up very working class, I was getting money that I had never seen before. I never had any kind of financial training around it, no financial education. And so I didn't really have any clue. I was kind of like, those basketball players, when you hear they make all of those millions and then they get broke, because nobody taught them how to deal with that kind of money, right? And so for me, that was also something that I recognized that I had to get some kind of financial education around as well. So that is something that I also encourage women to do, to start to learn about money, especially if your family was a family that did not have those conversations with you.
Yeah, and that's so important, because I can just think, even not as a person who quote unquote made it, but a friend of mine and I were having this conversation a few days ago about how, I was saying how at different times in my life and relationships, I would find myself helping people, even with not having a lot, but it was just this thing. And she's like, well, I would never do that. She just wasn't wired that way. And I said, well, you know what? I think that for me, and it is can be a self-esteem issue, that when you're that person who maybe, you're used to people not really liking you, or you've been through situations where maybe, that weren't positive, sometimes you can feel that by giving, that the more you give, whether it's finance or whatever it is that you're giving, that somehow that's going to make them love you more. Yes. And that's not necessarily the case, because 9 times out of 10 they'll end up using you and abusing you.
Exactly.
Because they take that as, they look at that and see that as a weakness, and okay, yeah, whatever, that's fine. You can give me that money, but it doesn't mean I'm going to care about you. It doesn't mean I'm going to stay.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's just so many important things that we need to learn along those lines. Well, this is something not from the book, because of course, in doing my research, I did have a chance to listen to the TED Talk that you did a few years ago. And in that TED Talk, you talked about your grandmother, who's also mentioned in the book. And tell us a little bit about your grandmother and what she did in her 70s. I think a lot of the women may be mature. I know I am. And that there may be things that they want to do that they think is too late. But your grandma, that wasn't the case with your grandmother. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I did a TED Talk that actually went viral, called Get Out of Your Box. And in the talk, I talk about my grandmother really had a love of the arts. She really encouraged me to be in the arts, and she would come out to all of my shows. And I think if there was another lifetime, if she was born in another lifetime, she definitely would have been an entertainer, right? And at one point, when I was at the height of my career, my grandmother came to me, and she was like about 75, 76. And she said, Trey, grandma's always had this dream to be a rapper. And I was like, what? I was like, I don't know about that, Gran. Right? And she was like, no, I'm going to rap. I want to be on stage, and I'm going to, release a song. And and as I said in the TED Talk, I would love to have said that I was really encouraging and be like, you go for it, Gran, but I was kind of like, I don't know. I think your time has passed. That she was And my grandmother didn't listen to me, and she went out and she recorded. She went into the studio, used her pension money. She recorded a song, and she burnt a couple of CDs, and she went out and was selling them in the barber shops. She was selling them
Wow.
in hair salons. She even did a video. She put it up on YouTube. And then she went to England on a visit, and there was a show in England very similar to the Oprah Winfrey Show, but it was called the Trisha Show by this black woman who had her own talk show. And my grandmother went down there, and she said, "Oh, the security guard was like, 'Where are you going?' And she was like, 'I'm here to see Trisha,' right?" And the security guard was like, "Slow down there, old lady." And he took the CD from my grandmother and kind of was like, okay, I'll make sure she gets it or whatever. And he apparently listened to the CD in his car. And he was so impressed by my grandmother's tenacity that he actually gave it over to one of Trisha's producers. And they invited my grandmother onto the show. My grandmother became this kind of overnight celebrity. She was given. They then invited her to be this guest spot person who would give advice to people who, if they were having problems in their relationship.
Wow. Okay.
My grandmother then won like the CBC Arts Award. She was on radio in Canada. They wrote some newspaper articles. And she was just having the time of her life, And during that time, she got diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer, and she was doing radiation and chemotherapy. And at one point, she was just like, "I'm done. I've I can't take this." And as anyone who's ever witnessed a family member going through treatment, it's just cruel. It's just so horrid, and it was so awful on her. And I went into her room and I was like, "Grandma, come on, you can't give up. You gotta take the therapy, and you gotta go back to chemo. You can't just give up and die." And she was like, she said, "Trey, I'm done." And she said, "You know why?" And she said, "Because I've lived my life. I lived my dream." And she said, "All of you said I couldn't be a rapper, and I did it." Right? She said, "I was on TV." She said, "I was on the radio." And she said, "I lived my life." And as I said in the TED Talk, I said, if there was one lesson I learned, that if I was in my final hour, my final minutes, my final second, would I be able to say, "I'm done," because I've lived my life? And that was the biggest lesson that my grandmother has taught me, to always live your life. And that was also about the book, because for so many years, I kept saying, "I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book." So that was also one of my bucket list items, to be like, okay, I can say at the end, "I'm done," because I wrote the book. And of course I have more things, but that was on my list. And that was the biggest lesson my grandmother gave me, is that you're never too old. You're never too old to dream, and let no one deter you from your dream. And it's kind of like that thing, when everybody says no, but God says yes, nobody can stop you. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that story. When I listened to it, I was like, yes, I had to bring that up, even though it's not in the book, but you do talk about your grandmother. And actually it all kind of goes together, because obviously she was a Black girl in love with herself. Willing, to just take a chance. And, she believed in herself. She believed in her gifts. She believed in her talent. And it was something that she wanted to do. And she went for it. And I just think that in and of itself is so encouraging and inspiring to all of us, that you come from that. It's in your blood. It's in your genes.
It's in my genes. That's where I come from.
Exactly. And, I just thank you for being so willing to tell your story and share your story, in this book. And just Black girl in love with herself. And I keep putting it up because I want you all to get copies. We'll tell you what's coming up next month here in a moment. Yes. We'll tell you what's coming up with that in a few moments, because this is not the last time that we will have a chance to talk to Trey. But as we're getting close to, let me make sure I get all my questions. Okay, yes, there are a couple of things that I just want to ask you, and these are just general questions, just to learn a little bit more about you. So this is something to think about. It's nothing too crazy. But I know you, as a powerful Black woman who's following in the footsteps of the women in your family, as well as just powerful Black women, either present or who have gone on before us, if you could choose three to have brunch with,
Ooh.
living or not, what three black women would you choose to do brunch with, and
Wow.
why?
Definitely Lorraine Hansberry.
Oh, wow.
Um, yes, Raisin in the Sun as a playwright. I've loved her work and I've watched too many documentaries about her. I
Mhm.
really love her. Nina Simone
Wow.
also is like a big inspiration for me. I think for me, of just the unconventional, her just being so unconventional and her moving through the industry as a black dark skinned woman and everybody trying to knock her down and her having such a sense and purpose of her blackness, right, and being like, I do it for my people. That
Hmm.
really inspires me because I feel that's where my work is always centered at all
Hmm.
times, is for black women. And of course my work has gone mainstream, and other women outside of the black community definitely have my work has resonated with them. But I love how Nina was very clear on, this is the work that I do. And then everybody who knows me knows it's Oprah Winfrey,
Right.
because I love me some Oprah, man. I love me some
Mhm.
Oprah. And I was a latchkey kid at 12 years old, coming home every single day at 4 o'clock watching Oprah. And it was the first time I saw a black woman on TV who looked like me, for me to believe it was possible. So those would definitely be the women who I feel have shaped me, shaped my identity. Also Whoopi Goldberg, because I started
Right.
out comedy, and she also, I loved her stuff, her comedic timing, her one woman shows. So I would say all of those women have played a factor in my life, And then again, someone who's not living, I would love to sit down with my grandmother again and have
Hmm.
one more last conversation, because there's just so many things I feel like I would like to have said or asked or know. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing. And you know who I thought about, even though unfortunately I haven't had a chance to see your initial play yet, but just knowing what I know about it, I think of Intozaki Shange with For Colored
Yeah.
Girls.
Yeah. For
That's who
colored
popped
girls.
in
Yes.
the
Yeah. People compared the play a lot to that.
right.
The Kink, they said it was like the modern day colored girls, for colored girls who had considered suicide. So yes, she was also very influential in my life as well. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, that's initially who I thought about. And I have another question, just a general question.
Mhm.
Now, two parts. Now, if you could take a trip by yourself, I know you're
No,
a mom, but somebody
don't
said you
tempt
can go
me. Don't,
for a
don't
couple
tempt
weeks and we got the baby.
me. Yeah.
If you could go away for a couple of weeks, where would you go? What would you listen to? What would be on your playlist?
Ooh.
What would you read? And if you had a chance to stream a favorite show, what would that be?
Oh my gosh. My favorite place, I love Hawaii. The Big Island is one of my favorite places. Also Turks and Caicos. I also love Turks and Caicos. Anywhere with a beach. I love a good beach. I'm definitely a beach girl, and it has to be like, I'm very specific about my beaches. Like, it has to have white sand, aqua blue sea. I'm very, very specific. Like, that's the kind of beach I want. Um, what show would I watch? People who know me always laugh at this, but it's true. I love, give me a good Dateline, a
Oh,
Dateline
okay.
mystery,
News. Okay. Okay,
or 2020. I love like
so
these murder
that's not
mystery shows.
escapism, but I got it.
I love that kind of stuff. I love watching, and I love documentaries. Anything
Okay.
documentary, anything like
Mhm.
Dateline, somebody's gone missing. I love a good mystery. So
Gotcha.
that is good. And probably book wise, anything by a black author I like. I also love a good self-help book. I love self-help. So I think that's why I got into this industry, because I've read, I don't think there's a self-help book I haven't read, right?
Okay. Hmm.
So I think that. And music wise, for downtime, I really like, I love a good Lauryn Hill, like her old
Okay.
stuff. I really
Right.
like. I love some Sade. Sade really does it for me all times. God, what else do I like? Yeah, I think those are my people. Like I like some things very calm, cool, collected, those kind of vibes. India Ari, I also love. You know, when I'm running and I want to get a little ratchet, I listen to some real ratchet stuff. Right,
All right, nothing wrong with that. We all need a little ratchet every now and
so
again.
I can be a
Nothing
little
wrong with
ratchet. So I listen to ratchet stuff in the morning when I'm running. But my downtime, I like to be, yeah, kind of neo soul kind of vibes. So I think that would be it. Did I answer everything? Right?
it. You did.
Okay,
You
cool.
did. You did. And
Cool.
that's it for those kind of questions. We just want break it up a little bit and all of that. So I am currently scrolling the ways that people can get in touch with you or stay up with what you've got going on social as well as your website. Any I know of course you're doing the book tour, virtual book tours and
Yeah.
things like that. Anything else specifically you have that you're working on right now that we can be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I'm currently pitching quite a few shows. I'm also the development producer at CTV, Bell Media. So I'm getting a lot of pitches done to me. So that's been great. Um, Definitely follow me on Instagram, Black Girl in Love with Herself. My website is treyanthony.com, Trey, treyanthony.com. And I'm going to be also doing a Mother's Day show very soon, talking about Black women and their mothers. And my mother's going to join me, and we're going to talk about a chapter in the book because I talk about Black moms in the book. So that's coming up soon. So please watch out for that. And I have a new mastermind group where we do a deep dive into Black Girl in Love with Herself every Tuesday. So you could email me to join that. That starts next week, Tuesday. So, and that's kind of it really. And the book is being sold anywhere that books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, Audible. The Audible book is so amazing. I love the Audible book because my mom is on there and my
I
sister.
listened to it today, actually. I did listen to it. It was fun to hear your mom and your sister. So definitely, and hearing you read as well. So
Yeah.
if you get a chance, I have both read it in the book form, but then I also listen to the Audible. So yes, I would suggest either or for anyone who's interested. And along that line, as I mentioned just a moment ago, this isn't Trey's last time with us. I'm just going to put this up. I want everybody to let me see, make sure it's popping up for me. Hold on, some of these too many things going on at one time. Okay, yes, there it is. It's scrolling at the bottom. On May the 24th, which is a Monday, Trey is going to come back and join us. And we are going to actually do a deep dive into Black Girl in Love with Herself. So this is kind of an introduction to her and her work. But I want people to have a chance to actually read the book because there is so much that we didn't get a chance to talk about. It's not just her talking about her life and her experiences and giving advice or inspiration. There are also things in here that you can do for yourself, questions that you can answer, things to just help you in your own journey toward falling in love with yourself, preparing for a relationship, all those sorts of things. So that, and I will post again about it just to remind everybody, but go ahead and snag you a copy. And that event will be in a Zoom, so that way we can talk about some things. You'll talk about sex or whatever else we want to talk about.
That's
so everyone wants to talk about. Yeah, in a private group. So
I love it.
So I'm looking forward to that. And so that is all I have for this evening, Trey. I want to thank you again for agreeing to come on and be with me for the initial inaugural Live Well Sister episode, powered by Brown Girl Collective. You are indeed a joy. I love your energy. I love, this book, as I said, I've already twice, and it's probably going to be several more times that I refer back to it just in my own journey. So I thank you so much for your time. I thank you for all that you're doing, and I just wish you continued blessings, continued success, and I look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you so much. I look forward to being back next month and we're doing our big deep dive. And congratulations on your launch. This is so needed in our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. And everyone, I wish you a great night. I know tomorrow is Good Friday. It's going to be a great Friday for me because I actually don't have to work my day job.
Girl.
So tomorrow is Good Friday. So, I hope everyone has a great weekend. Enjoy your Easter if you celebrate it. If you don't, just have a good weekend just because a good weekend is always a great thing to do. And in all of your doing and everything that you've got going on, just make sure you take time to live your best life because I want you to live well, sister. Have a good night.
Have a great night. Thank you.
You're welcome.